in town. He sees a man with a dark cloak, covering his eyes and face. And the guy says, "Ooh, you can't trust that guy. That's no way. You can't trust that guy." Well, it turns out, unbeknownst to the speaker, that guy is his brother, who he considers the most trustworthy guy in the world, right? So you get this quote unquote contradiction. He is both trustworthy and not trustworthy, but that's precisely what the opacity of an intentional context blocks. There is no contradiction there. So it actually kind of works the opposite of how you're saying here.
Get a contradiction precisely because of
Right.
the invalidity of the inference that you just pointed out. That's why you don't get a contradiction.
It's semantic opacity. It prevents the contradiction.
But that's exactly Gary's point, is the mistake that you're doing is ignoring that these belief things, that is namely that it cannot be determined independently of the rules of the religion, which is what you're assuming. And you're just saying, well, they can represent it, but that's exactly what's in question. So your account doesn't give us a clear example or a clear account of why that actually ends up. You're just saying, well, it's just this opacity or something. But Garby actually explains that the reason why you lead to a contradiction that John both knows and doesn't know his father, i.e. the hooded man, is precisely because of ignoring this belief condition that I'm talking about, that does not operate the same way in all the examples that you've used. And that's what we call the non-substitutivity of identicals in epistemic and intentional contexts. That's the argument.
Right. But opacity blocks there from being a contradiction. It doesn't generate it, it blocks it.
So can I just give an example for this, probably more so for the sake of the audience than anybody else? I think it would be helpful to have a concrete example on the table here, right? So we might say something like, Lois Lane believes that Superman can fly. Lois Lane believes that Clark Kent cannot fly, but Superman is Clark Kent, so we could substitute it out, and we get that Lois Lane does believe that Clark Kent can fly by substitution, and now it seems like we have a contradiction. But the point here is that inference of substituting out the identicals within the belief context is invalid, and that's why you don't get that contradiction, right? So
it prevents the contradiction.
You need to tell us.
Sorry, sir.
You need to tell us: are you accusing us of having a contradiction here, or because it seemed like you were a fan of the opacity point, you were pushing the opacity
point.
No,
I'm saying we all recognize the contradiction. I'm saying that you're not explaining how that works. And so the opacity is not going to. I'm saying the only thing that explains this is exactly what the Berlin condition, right? Of which distinguishes from all the different examples that you were giving of natural objects. That's what I'm saying. It operates much more like mental objects or a game of solitaire versus that. That's my point.
Father, so I think, why do you think that God isn't like a title term, like president?
Because it can mean different things. It can point out different things.
Right? It's used for multiple things. It's used for the divine energies. It's used for the persons. It's used for the essence. It's used for humans. It's used for angels. It's a generic term.
Yeah, it's a generic. It doesn't operate like any of the examples that you've used. So you just keep using these.
What's a generic term? What's a generic term?
God.
Well, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. Sometimes I think it's like a title term.
Well, that's what's in question.
And it can function like certainly term. In the Old Testament, Elohim is a name. I mean, it's like a name for God. And if the Old Testament, if the Jews and Christians are referring to this being by a name,
sorry,
it is not. This is divine revelation. This is divine revelation. God reveals himself and says his name, and then those guys start talking about him, the guy who just revealed himself, and then somebody else comes in and says, that guy has some different properties. Then they've picked up the reference. So I just don't see.
Trent,
that's my argument, is that natural theology cannot establish a proper name of God like the Islamic Allah or Trinity.
Well, we
It doesn't
we
have to.
disagree on that, but that's fine. I don't have to rely on that. I'm
They're
talking
given in
about
Revelation.
the whole the reference of God depends on revelation, and the Muslims just pick it up. They borrow it and take it over from the Jews and
and
the
then they
Christians. So I don't have
leave that
any.
revelation.
I have
It's
no
the
natural
Trinity.
theology
The
whatsoever.
Trinity is the
I've
God
got
of the
no
Old
natural
Testament.
revelation in this
The
project.
Trinity is the God of the Old Testament. That's why David worshiped Jesus. And I think in your last stream you said David didn't worship Jesus. Is that correct?
Not by that name. Did
He
he?
didn't know
Did David
Yeshua.
know? Did David ever mention Jesus? Did he mention the name
Yeshua
Jesus?
appears in the book of Zechariah. It's Yeshua that appears. You didn't know that?
And you think he was referring to a first century Palestinian Jew? Huh, Jay? Do you? Huh?
You don't
Do you?
think you
Huh?
don't think that Jesus is the Son
You
of
didn't
God in the
realize
Old
that?
Testament?
You didn't realize that
Look at this
Jesus
guy
lived
melting
in
down. He
first
doesn't know
century
that the Old
Palestine?
Testament. He
Oh
doesn't
my
know that the
God,
Old
he
Testament
doesn't even
teaches
know
that
that
Jesus
Jesus
is the
lived
answer.
in first
Listen,
century
you sound
Palestine.
like a
Oh
demon,
my
dude. You
God,
sound
dude.
possessed.
Who even
Jesus
is
is
that?
the
Oh,
God
well.
of the Old Testament. You didn't know that?
Yes, he is. Amen, brother. Amen.
Did
Praise
Abraham?
God.
Look at this guy,
So
acts like a
what?
demon. You're
So what?
possessed, dude. Did
So what?
Jesus eat with Abraham?
Probably. So what? So what?
Probably. You don't know what happened in Genesis? You don't know? Probably.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar!
You don't know? You don't know? Just make
You're
your
not familiar
point.
with
Make an
Genesis
argument.
where
This is
there's a
boring.
meal?
You're boring. You're boring.
So
Make an
this is all you
argument.
have. Look at this guy.
Make an argument.
The argument
This is
is that
boring. I
your
came here to
natural
evaluate
theology fails. All he
arguments.
has is talking over me. Look at this guy.
I don't have
Natural
natural theology.
fails. Look at you,
I
man.
haven't.
You
I
act
have
like a
nothing that I have
demon, dude.
said. Nothing that I have said hinged on any natural theology. You're full of straw men, red
No.
herrings. You're a
You said
feast
in
of
your last
fallacies.
stream. You said in your last stream that David didn't know Jesus. You said David didn't know Jesus.
What
Not by
difference
that
does it
name.
make?
Not as a first
doesn't-
century Palestinian Jew. And also, so what?
Jesus is
What's
so
your
you
point?
don't believe that you don't believe he's the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament?
What's your point? Make an argument.
You don't believe that Jesus is the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament?
Of course
What
I
if he
do. Of course
is?
I do.
Okay, so
So what?
so Jesus says that Abraham believed in me, right? In John 5?
Yeah, so what? Yeah, so what?
Then it's Jesus and the Trinity in the Old Testament. You were wrong.
Yeah, so, no,
Yeah.
false. That doesn't
Which
follow.
one is it? So
It
it's
doesn't
not the
follow.
Trinity in the Old Testament.
But-
So it's not?
Yeah, okay.
What are
Here's
you doing? What is this?
$1,000. I'll give you
Is the
$100
Trinity
right
revealed
now.
in the
I'm
Old
going to put this
Testament, man?
in
It's a simple
escrow.
question. What are
If
you
you
doing?
can make a syllogism, if you can make a
Is the
syllogism,
Trinity revealed
you
in the
got
Old
no
Testament?
arguments.
Stop ignoring the
You
question.
got no
Stop
arguments.
deflecting. Is the
I
Trinity
said
revealed in
it
the Old
is,
Testament?
yes.
You're sure
Of
it is?
course it is. So what?
Okay, so
what?
when Islam picks up that revelation, it's no longer that God.
Uh-huh.
Why would that follow?
Why not? What the hell are you talking
Because
about,
Islam
dude?
is predicated on
talking
rejecting
about?
the triad.
So what? This is a non
Then it's
sequitur.
not the
They
same
can
reference
refer
anymore
to the triune
explicitly.
God without knowing that God is triune, just as Lois Lane can refer to Clark
It's
Kent not knowing he can fly.
explicitly rejecting
When
the
Lois
triune
Lane
God.
says
The
Clark
religion
Kent
is
a weakling,
erected.
she's
The
referring to a
religion is
person
erected
that she has
on
a
the
day rate
rejection
belief
of
All right,
about,
guys. Hey,
that
let
he
me
is
let me
a
jump in here.
strong
This is getting a little bit out of hand. Let's let Trent make his point about Clark Kent Superman real quick, just to let him do that, and then we'll continue.
Yeah. So, what I'm saying is that you can refer to the triune God without knowing that God is triune. That's just simple. It's just
It's not
you could
that.
have a
It's
million examples. You can
explicitly
refer
rejecting
to
the triune
people.
God.
You can refer to people in
It's
ways
not.
that
It's a
assume they
false
don't have
analogy,
essential
dude,
properties.
because the
Jay,
that they
let's
actually
let
have.
him
It's called
finish his thought, and then we'll have you come in.
It's called the It's called the de dicto de re distinction, and you can easily. It happens all the time. You can refer to things that have properties that you not only don't know they have, but you can believe they don't have them. It's easy. People do it all the time.
All right, now let's let Jay come in, and Trent, don't interrupt. Trent, don't interrupt.
So Again, he had no idea about Old Testament theology. He doesn't even know if Jesus is revealed in the Old Testament. He denied it the other day in his stream. And then when we come to this basic question, I asked him if the Trinity is in the Old Testament. He doesn't know. Maybe, I guess, who cares? The reason that matters is that he just argued a few minutes ago that Islam picked up this revelation in general from what they heard Christians and others saying. Remember, Muhammad was unlettered. He couldn't read. So he was getting all this orally, right? Islam is predicated not just on natural theology. They do have a natural theology. I've debated Sheikh Azhar Rashid on this point. It's predicated on an explicit rejection of Trinity. In fact, in the Quran, there are entire chapters and sections saying you may not believe that Allah is the Father. You may not believe in triad. So the analogies and examples that he gave fail because the religion of Islam is erected on a specific rejection of the Trinity. That's why it matters to go into the Old Testament and talk about natural theology. And the reason that Father Deacon brought up the core beliefs of natural theology is that that's Swinburne and Aquinas and everybody's ideas as to what the essential supposed attributes of God are from natural theology. When Aquinas argues this point, he argues it from natural theology. Vatican II is arguing natural theology. And by the way, you notice they don't want to talk about the magisterial contradictions. That's the argument I came to bring. He's pretending like it's not an argument. I'm going to keep asking them, has your magisterium been consistent on Islam? Can you guys answer that?
So no one interrupt. Let's move now to Chris. So Chris, take as much time as you want. No one interrupt, please.
Okay. So it seemed like Jay's response to Trent there was that the crucial difference between, the Superman example and Muslims' conception of God is that Muslims explicitly reject. They don't just not know. It's not just that they don't know that God is a Trinity, but they explicitly reject that God is a Trinity. Okay, that's still not enough, right? Lois Lane can successfully refer to Clark Kent even when she explicitly rejects the proposition that Clark Kent can fly, which is a true proposition, right? Clark Kent can fly. That's a true proposition. Even when she
let's let him finish his thought, Jay.
Even when she explicitly rejects that, she can still succeed in referring to Clark Kent and in having other intentional attitudes toward Clark Kent, like loving him, maybe adoring him, worshiping him, whatever the case may be. So it's not enough.
That's why I said it hinges on the question of what worship and adore means in Vatican II. This whole debate came about, I assume, because of the debate that we had on Timcast about worship and adore in the text of Vatican II. And if Vatican II had restricted the language to Muslims have an idea of God or a conception of God, and I mentioned Jake, right? Jake knows about the Trinity. Jake does not worship and adore the Trinity. Do you believe that Jake, the Muslim metaphysician who rejected Catholicism to become a Muslim, does he worship and adore the Trinity?
De re or de dicto?
In any sense, if he explicitly rejects the Trinity.
If he explicitly rejects the Trinity, it would depend on what his description of God. I don't know that. I don't know this man. I don't know under what description he refers to or worships God, so I can't give an answer to that. But if he holds the classical Islamic conception of God, then yes, de re, he worships the Trinity.
Even though he says, I explicitly reject, hate, and oppose your triadic deity, he is a demon, he still worships the Trinity.
The same way that Lois Lane can refer to and love.
Worship and adore is not the same thing as a referent, dude. Worship and adore.
Let me finish. So the same way that Lois Lane can refer to and love is very much like worship and adore, right? Clark Kent, even though she explicitly rejects that Clark Kent can fly. Now, you tell me what's supposed to be the relevant difference between
to the Unitarian Pharisees when he's debating with them, you do not have the love of God and you do not have the Father.
What relevance is that? Of what relevance is that? I'm not answering that question. Until you tell me what relevance it has.
You won't answer the question because it refutes the very thing that you just argued.
No, because
look at this guy. Look at this demon back here. It's a Unitarian position that's equivalent to Islam. It's the Pharisees who say we have the Father, and Jesus says you do not have the Father, nor do you have the love of God in you. It's in my slides.
And you can refer to and worship
My God,
the
it's
true
in his
God
slides,
without.
You said they have the love of God. Jesus says you do not have the love of God explicitly.
No, I didn't say that.
Yes, you
No, I
did.
didn't
You
say
said that. You said that
No,
he can still
no,
love God.
no,
You said
no,
love and yes, you
no.
did. Love and adore.
I said he can still love. He can still love God.
And what does
I didn't
Jesus
say
say?
have. I didn't say have the love of God. Have the love of God would be a very
Then it doesn't get you
technical
anywhere.
term about the
All of
possession
this
of
is worthless.
sanctifying grace.
It doesn't get you anywhere. That's the point.
In terms of
You do not
salvation,
have the
I've
love
never.
of God. You do not have the Father. It's John 8 and John 5.
In terms of
Right.
salvation,
It's
I've never
not
claimed that it does.
right. It's not salvific. Having the Father in that sense. That has nothing to do
Then
with
Vatican
reference or
II is
worship.
wrong to say
It's just a
worship and
big
adore.
pile of non sequiturs.
Then Vatican
What's
II
the
is wrong to say worship and adore.
Vatican II, Vatican
Stupid heretics.
II.
That's
You know
just
what?
your
I actually
dogma,
want
I'm
to.
going
idiot.
to.
It's your
I'm going
dogma.
to double. I'm going to double my
Can I just
offer.
ask?
Your
I'm
magisterium,
now
you goober.
offering $200 for you to put as argument in a syllogism that can be
You just
evaluated.
laugh
for
Let's
about
turn
logical
now.
your own
form.
Hey guys.
magisterium.
Let's turn to Father Ananias. He hasn't had a chance to speak in a while, so let's give him a chance.
All right, what if I do some magic for you? What is philosophy but sorcery with words? Huh? Okay. Let me address
I
another.
literally thought you were going to do a magic. I thought you were going to do a magic trick, and I was all excited.